ate noodles with no packet.
On June 30th, 2019, the music industry woke up to one of the most explosive stories it had ever seen. Scooter Braun's company, Ithaca Holdings, had just completed the acquisition of Big Machine Label Group, the Nashville-based record label founded by Scott Borchetta, for a reported $300 million. On the surface, standard business. A media company acquires a record label. Happens every few years in the industry. Except this acquisition included something that made it anything but standard. Big Machine Label Group was the home of Taylor Swift's first 6 studio albums.
And he took every single fucking album, bro. Like I said, shrewd businessman, bro. That's why Taylor had to re-record her first 6 albums so then she could have ownership to them, bro.
Taylor Swift, Fearless, Speak Now, Red, 1989, Reputation, 15 years of her life. The recordings that turned a teenage country singer from Pennsylvania into one of the best-selling artists in music history. And those master recordings, the actual audio files that generate royalties every single time a song streams, syncs, or gets licensed anywhere in the world, now belong to Scooter Braun. To understand why this hit so hard, you need to understand what masters actually are. A master recording is the original recording of a song. Whoever owns the master gets paid every time that recording is used.
Yes. The master recording is now owned by Scooter Braun, okay? Because when you sign most of these deals with these labels, they want to own the master recording. You can't own your masters. It doesn't make sense for you to own your masters. Why would you do that? They're the ones who are doing all the marketing, the pushing of your record. They're the one doing all the, I guess, the branding deals and getting you essentially what you want, right? Fame and recognition for your art. A lot of people will take those deals without realizing that you need to own your publishing and you need to own your master recordings, because the person who owns that, they can say and do whatever the fuck they want to do with your shit, dude. It's bullshit.
Every stream on Spotify, every placement in a movie or TV show, every time it's licensed for a commercial, every time it gets sampled. Masters are the most durable financial asset in music. They generate revenue indefinitely. Long after an artist stops performing, long after they stop releasing new material, the masters keep paying whoever owns them. Taylor Swift's masters, 15 years of some of the most commercially successful pop recordings in history, were a financial asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And now they belong to a man she had publicly had friction with. Taylor Swift did not stay quiet. Within hours of the announcement, she posted a statement on Tumblr that went globally viral. She called the acquisition her worst-case scenario. She said she had not been given a fair chance to purchase her own masters. She alleged she had spent years trying to negotiate ownership of her recordings and had been structurally prevented from doing so. She said Borchetta had presented the deal in a way that she only found out about through the news, with no prior warning and no opportunity to make a competing offer. And then she used a word that cut through every legal disclaimer and corporate statement like a knife. She called Scooter Braun a bully. Now here's what the internet argued about for the next 3 years. Legally, Scooter did nothing wrong. He purchased a company through a legal transaction. The contract Taylor signed as a teenager with Big Machine in 2005 gave the label ownership of her master recordings, standard industry practice at the time.
Yeah, of course. Like, it's the same, but this is what you learn as you spend more time in the music industry, is that most artists sign terrible deals, bro. They don't read the contracts. They don't have lawyers. They don't have they just, they sign on it. And then as they get older and they have more experience and they talk to more people, they realize like, yo, my deal is the worst thing for me. I don't get anything out of this. The splits are 80-20, 20% to the artist. Okay? They don't know any of their recording rights. They don't know any of that shit. But as they get more time in the game, they realize what this is. Okay. So now she grew up in this idea. I need my recordings. I need my masters. But sometimes if you're a smart artist, you can finesse it the same way Frank Ocean was able to finesse. What is it? I think it was Sony. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was either Sony or Columbia, whatever label Frank Ocean was on. He had one final album to turn in. He turned in that weird bullshit of an album. The one where it's like the music thing where he's got the headphones or whatever. The one before Blonde, right? Because there's 2 albums. Blonde was his own official, actual release that he was holding on to, the Golden Child. The other album was just like some bullshit he had to give to the label to fulfill the contract obligations, right?
Especially for debut artists who have no leverage and no attorneys experienced enough to fight for ownership clauses. That contract was signed when Taylor was 15 years old. She was a minor, and the terms of that contract, which she had been trying to renegotiate for years, meant that her life's creative work legally belonged to someone else. Now Scooter comes into the story. He knew exactly what he was buying. He knew the documented history of friction between Taylor and people in his circle, specifically the ongoing and very public beef between Taylor and Kanye West, which Scooter had been adjacent to, and in some ways amplified. In 2016, Scooter had reposted Kanye's Instagram video that mocked Taylor, and Taylor had called that out specifically in her Tumblr statement. There was documented public history of tension, and Scooter purchased the company anyway. What happened in the negotiations after the sale is where the story gets even more complicated. According to Taylor's public statements, Scooter's team did offer to sell her the masters, but the terms attached to that offer included a non-disclosure agreement that would have permanently prevented her from speaking publicly about the situation. She said no. Scooter's team later claimed the offer was genuine and that she refused. Taylor maintained the terms were structured to silence her. We will likely never know the full truth of what was said in those rooms. What we do know is what happened next. And what happened next was one of the most strategically brilliant moves in the history of the music industry. Taylor Swift announced she would re-record re-record every single one of her first 6 albums, from scratch. New recordings, new sessions, new versions that she would own completely. With a marketing campaign built entirely around redirecting her fan base, one of the most loyal, organized, and commercially powerful fan bases in entertainment history, from the original masters
The fucking Swifties, bro.
she didn't own to the new recordings she did. Taylor's version became a cultural phenomenon. Fearless, Taylor's version. Red, Taylor's version. Speak Now, Taylor's version. 1989, Taylor's version. Each release was a media event. Each release directed hundreds of millions of streams away from the original catalog. Streaming platforms began switching to the new versions. Radio stations followed. Film and TV sync deals began moving to Taylor's version recordings because the commercial case was undeniable. Taylor's fan base would actively seek out and promote the versions she owned, while the originals would gradually fade in cultural relevance. For Scooter, this was a problem, because the financial value of masters is entirely dependent on them being the commercially relevant version of the recordings. If the market moves to Taylor's version, the original Scooter owned became progressively less valuable. The re-recording campaign was essentially a hostile takeover of her own catalog, using cultural leverage to undermine the financial...
Bro, that was a masterclass, bro, in completely shitting on the music industry, bro. She and the Swifties, that is a masterclass. Major W, bro.
value of an asset she no longer legally owned but could still influence through her relationship with her audience. Scooter sold the original masters to a private equity firm called Shamrock Holdings for a reported $300 million. He had purchased the entire Big Machine label group for $300 million. He sold what may have been the single most valuable asset in that acquisition, Taylor Swift's catalog, for approximately what he paid for the whole company. Do the math. If Shamrock paid $300 million for the masters and Scooter had paid $300 million for the whole label, he effectively acquired every other asset Big Machine owned, other artist catalogs, publishing rights, label infrastructure, for free. Or more precisely, the Taylor Swift catalog may have appreciated in value between acquisition and sale, meaning Scooter potentially profited even on the masters before selling them. Was permanent. The Taylor Swift situation was permanent. The Taylor Swift situation became the defining public narrative of Scooter Braun's career and the lens through which every other relationship he had was now being scrutinized. Here's where people started connecting the dots, and once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Taylor Swift was not the only major artist who eventually left Scooter Braun's orbit. Let's go through them one by one. Ariana Grande. Long-term management relationship. Dangerous Woman. Sweetener. Thank You. Next. Positions. A run of albums that made her one of the 5 most famous people on the planet. Billion-stream records. Sold-out world tours. The Grande brand generating hundreds of millions across music, fragrance, fashion, and brand deals. And Scooter was managing all of it, taking his percentage across every revenue stream. Think about what that era actually looked like in real numbers. The Sweetener World Tour alone grossed over $146 million. Thank You.
Damn.
Next, the album moved 360,000 units in its first week. The fastest-selling album by a female artist since Beyoncé's Lemonade. Her REM Beauty fragrance line reportedly crossed $100 million in its first year. The Grande brand at its peak wasn't just a music career. It was a multi-vertical entertainment and lifestyle empire. And Scooter was the manager across all of it. Every deal that went through his company generated a commission. Every partnership that his infrastructure facilitated generated a fee. This wasn't just percentage of touring anymore. This was percentage of an empire. Then, sometime around 2022 to 2023, she left. Quietly. No statement. No interview. No Tumblr post. No lawsuit. The kind of exit that gets handled entirely by lawyers before it ever reaches the public. The music industry has a name for that kind of departure. A soft exit. And soft exits from major long-term management deals don't happen because everything was great. They happen when enough things weren't adding up and both parties agreed that the cleanest solution was the quietest one. We don't know the specifics. We probably never will. What we know is that Ariana Grande's current management structure looks nothing like it did during the Scooter era. We know the departure was clean, quiet, and final. And we know that when the artist who arguably elevated your profile from Justin Bieber's manager to the most powerful manager in music decides to leave at the absolute peak of her career, that's not just business, that's a verdict. Kanye West. Brief management relationship. Ended fast. Now, Kanye has spent years publicly and loudly talking about the music industry's exploitation of black artists, about ownership.
Yeah, the thing is also with Kanye, he was always talking about how when he started wearing the MAGA hat, how Scooter Braun didn't want him wearing the MAGA hat. Dude. He had talked about how, oh, this political stance that you're taking, it's bad. It's a bad look. It's not a good look on you as an artist. Why are you getting involved in politics? But what the fuck does Scooter Braun have to say about your political stance? That means it goes to show you it has nothing to do with Kanye West. It has everything to do with Scooter Braun and the way he wants to be perceived, because he wants to continue to make sure that you're a high earning entity and he is able to put as much money as possible in your pocket. If you're not able to have brand deals because you're making poor political decisions, that affects the gross that this person can put in Braun's pocket, bro. I'm telling you, you niggas love money too much, man. God damn.
About contracts, about executives who treat artists like assets on a balance sheet. He literally changed his legal name to Ye and wore a White Lives Matter shirt on a runway partially to destabilize the corporate relationships around him. This is not a man who quietly accepts situations he disagrees with, and yet his time with Scooter ended with no diss track specifically about Scooter, no lawsuit, no public confrontation targeting him directly, just done. When Kanye West, who has publicly gone after Jay-Z, Drake, Pete Davidson, Gap, Adidas, his own label, and the entire fashion industry, quietly exits a management situation without making it a whole media cycle, that tells you something. That tells you the calculation was that the fastest exit was the most beneficial exit, and moving on was more valuable than making noise. Demi Lovato, J Balvin, Carly Rae Jepsen, Dan and Shay, Martin Garrix, Tori Kelly, artist after artist who came up under the SB Projects umbrella, generated massive revenue during their peak years under Scooter's management and eventually moved on. Some quietly, some with more friction. The roster that once read like a who's who of the global music industry gradually thinned out as Scooter's day-to-day management presence waned heading into his 2023 retirement announcement. And here's what's important to understand about how that roster was assembled in the first place. Scooter wasn't just signing any artist, he was signing a specific type of artist. Young, unsigned, or newly signed, enormous raw talent with a specific kind of marketability. And crucially, without the experience or legal infrastructure to negotiate the kind of protective contract terms that a veteran artist would demand.
Oh my god, dude, this nigga was preying on children, dude. No, okay, well, that's a bit crazy. Okay, he was preying on people that he knew would be tapped in the culture and the scene enough that he's essentially like almost like reading a stock chart, right? You're seeing these essentially like a startup, these new companies, these new artists that you see the way this artist moves and the way they're getting the reception online, the way their label, or sorry, not the label, but the fan base is reacting, the way the culture is reacting to this artist. I can see that this artist's trajectory will be placed here. Boom. And so then you sign the artist, you take them on early before they have any sort of backing to protect them from essentially 360 record deals. A 360 record deal is when a label takes a percentage of everything. Touring, branding, movies, sync, publishing, all your shit. Normally they wouldn't do that. Normally the label only takes money on your recordings, right? Usually that's how a label works. They will take a percentage off of your recordings, and that's how they will recoup. But based on the new sorry, there's so much information. Based on the new methodology and the way the new industry is positioned, now they want to be able to take a piece off of everything because records don't sell like they used to. So much fucking information in my head here, bro.
He found them early. He signed them when they were grateful for the opportunity. And then he built them into global superstars while the contracts they signed at the beginning of that journey remained in place. The common thread that critics had been identifying for years finally had enough data points to become undeniable. Scooter Braun's model worked best, generated the most value for Scooter. When artists were young, hungry, and didn't fully understand the long-term implications of what they were agreeing to. Long contracts, management percentages on gross revenue, significant structural influence over touring schedules, branding decisions, and business partnerships, all of it flowing through Scooter's infrastructure, all of it with his percentage attached at every level.